All right. So let's start off talking about the Unicorn Hunters because I went back and I watched your episode and I don't think I've ever seen any type of show, especially in that format where it was like absolute universal love for the founder, for the idea. Every single person committed and wanted to invest. Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was literally surreal. And it was actually during the height of the pandemic where I was like not leaving the house, seeing nobody. I flew to LA. And then when I got back the next day, I'm like, did that happen? Like the whole thing was so surreal. Like to honestly, I was emotional actually. I was trying not to get emotional because you're right. Like their reaction was so heartfelt and it was really what you see there. Like it felt awesome as an entrepreneur to like, sometimes you don't stop and recognize the like milestones that you have had or as an athlete or anything, right? You just like keep working and you keep going and you don't take a second. And to have like Steve Wozniak, the founder of the Apple computer, like say this is the best presentation that he's ever heard. And like, I mean, I have never been at a loss for words, as you'll probably recognize as you start to listen to me talk. And I had like no words. I just couldn't believe it. So that was honestly, that was a moment where I was like, I need to stop and recognize like, I put in a lot of hard work and this is just an incredible milestone in this journey, and I think that was a moment where I sat back and I was like, wow.
Yeah, no, you absolutely did crush it. You came off incredibly well. The concept, when the description of the company and what you were building, I think it just resonated. So, fantastic job. So I'm curious, like, I don't know how much you can talk about and kind of what's behind NDA, but like how's the sausage made? Like what's actually happening in these shows? And for anybody out there that's listening, Unicorn Hunters is similar to a Shark Tank style show, right? It's web only. Is it Amazon Prime? Is that where it streams on? Or
they're working on distribution deals for all the big things.
Yeah, but fantastic, an amazing panel, as you said. Yep. Woz is on it, and a bunch of
Treasurer of the United States and
former Treasurer Lance Bass, who what did Lance Bass say? Something he said, "I invest in people, and you're some of the extent of like I'm absolutely investing in you," which I think is a huge compliment.
And he like works out all the time and is a big user of the space, so that was actually kind of fun too. He was like he totally got it, like which is obviously was awesome too.
Well, I think that's exactly it, right? Like, I obviously ex-athlete, similar to yourself, worked out, have been working out my entire life. I was more in the CrossFit side, but I was doing class-based workouts. And I spent 8 years doing it. And then the pandemic hit and our particular box, initially closed and it, eventually killed it. It went out of business. Yep. It was really unfortunate. But it was during that period of time, it's like, okay, well, what do you do now? You couldn't buy fitness equipment. Yep. And, it was very difficult to get. So, in our situation, we were able to kind of start with a Peloton and kind of get that thing going and yep. then, started to cobble together. And now I have a really robust home gym. I don't know if I'll ever go back. It's a mixture of kind of my own programming, subscription-based programming that I do. I actually went and started a little fitness company myself during that period of time. That's awesome. More of a passion project with some friends, but it absolutely resonated with me. I think that COVID and kind of what we went through was like this sort of accelerator.
Totally.
But you started before COVID, which is awesome. So it's like a little bit of foresight, but the timing couldn't have been better, right? I would assume. Help me understand like that kind of like just being in the right place, right time. And I'm assuming you kind of blew up a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. It's been a really, went from a couple people operating a startup to a very, very massive team, which is, I get on the calls with all of them and I'm like still in shock. All these people are working here and like committing their life to this. And it's like a sort of a surreal experience still at this point. But I'm a big user of the space. I'm an athlete. I work out all the time. And I started to see years ago what I thought the future would look like and actually drew out like what I wanted the product to look like. This is like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And It's exactly what we built today. And it's exactly what came to fruition. So that's really exciting as a founder. And I think what's like, the part of the journey that people don't always get is like just the slugfest that it was to get here, right? And like at many points in this journey, I'm like, am I crazy? Like, I should just go get a job. Like, this is crazy. Like, when are you crazy and when are you a genius? Like, at what point do you, are you a risk taker? One part, are you like just out of your mind and should stop? And so, to your point, like, I think there were many points in the journey where things were really difficult, and I'm so grateful that I kept that conviction, because I wouldn't have been in the right place at the right time in 2020 had I not stayed on that journey or like had that conviction about it. And it's hard to keep that conviction, to be honest. I meet with thousands of investors from Silicon Valley that invested in Uber and Google and the best companies on earth. And when they tell you, you're a moron and this is never going to be the way things are, like, you're like, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe this isn't the way things are, right? Like, and it feels good, obviously, to now come to a point where like exactly what I thought was about to happened. And obviously, to your point, the pandemic accelerated that. So it's exciting, because sometimes people build great companies, but they're too early and people are not there yet, right? Like, they can't see the vision. And so I think, you also, there's timing, there's like, putting the hard work in, right? That gets it done. There's a lot of variables that make it work, right? And there's a lot that could go against you too.
Well, it's such an interesting balance, and I appreciate what you just said, because, as an entrepreneur in my own life, I find myself consciously having to push self-doubt out of my own head. Yep. I mean, there's moments, I don't know what it is. It's just, you're in a bad spot where you're like, what am I doing here? Like, really? Like, like
weeks that will go by where you have no victories. Like, it's like you're just working and it's just okay. And then like, all of a sudden, then the unicorn, like an opportunity like that comes along, and it's like, you're back, you're like, okay, I'm back in it. Like, and then there's just these periods where you're just killing yourself every day, but there's no massive, gain to see from it. Right. And so I think it's like those ebbs and flows that are just the reality of being a founder of any business. Right.
You almost can't let the highs get too high or the lows get too low. Right?
That's exactly
because you're always going to be brought back to that middle somewhere.
Exactly.
But it's funny. Like, the balance is, and I'm dealing with it a little bit myself right now with some ventures that I got cooking, is you're early, and it's scary when you're early because it hasn't truly been proven out, right? Like, when you started talking about this and the 2014, 15, 16 range, and you're like, all right, I think this thing could make sense. That's like, well, I don't know. People are going to always go to classes, and you got like Soul Cycles taken off, and you have these things. But it's like, that's how you become a unicorn, right? Because if you wait until now and everyone's like, oh yeah, this is the great time to do it. It's like, yeah, well, you missed your boat, right? Like, everyone's already doing it. So it is a little bit of that, like, you got to have that conviction in yourself, and you got to be that futurist. So I applaud you for that.
Yeah, no. And it's cool. Like, so now investors would say, like, a couple of weeks ago before the new variant, like, well, what are you going to do when the pandemic's over? And now that's sort of, quieted down because things are a little bit weird again. But I think what's interesting is, like, to your point where you started, is that our behavior has completely shifted. You will never be able to force somebody to go to work 5 days a week from 8 to 6. Like, people will be like, are you crazy? I'm not doing that. Same thing for the gym. You can get it done. I never thought I'd miss a day at the gym in my life, and I didn't go for a year, right? And I went back, and I'm like, whatever I've been doing didn't feel like I was doing, but I'm in the same shape that I was. Like, I still got it. Like, it worked, actually, And so I think it's interesting because, like, that validation from the year of this last year, now people realize that they can get it done working out the same parallel from home. And I think that was just something that, I knew that was the case for me, but it's exciting now that there's actual data to support sort of like, the anecdotal stuff that I'm hearing from you and from myself. And so now there's data with, a year of this to really support the future. And so for our customers, which are the gyms, like, I think they're coming to terms with, we can't just operate the business that we operated for the last 20 years, right? Something needs to change. And so it's exciting because I think in many ways it forced them to iterate. And so these great brands can still stay, kills me that CrossFit didn't do this 10 years ago. I'm like, you have the ultimate community. Forget Peloton's community. CrossFit's community is like nothing I've ever seen. Like, they could have done something and enabled this. So, like, I think in many ways it's forcing everybody to sort of look at things sooner than they would have. And I hope that that's going to be really good for the industry all around.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I heard you use the Blockbuster analogy somewhere. And
Totally.
I think
That's like
it's
the
such
best
a great
example.
analogy.
Yeah, it's like there's
Yeah.
one. It's like a hotel. You could go as like a joke and like reminisce in there. I'm like, come on. Like even the equipment guys, they're like sad they didn't make Peloton. They're like, all they did was put a screen on the bike. I'm like, call it what you may. It's an incredible product worth a lot of money now. Like you could say that, or you could just start iterating, right? Like the fitness equipment, you know, the dot lights up around the track. That's been going on for as long as I can remember. So, you know, I just think it's like, unless people are forced, you know, then, you know, this sort of like, they weren't forced to make changes or forced to evolve. And the customer was already starting to evolve. The customer was wanting that flexibility, but the gym wasn't willing to offer it. And then the pandemic was just a total showstopper, right? And so they had to adapt to serving people outside the gym, because that was the only way to do it, right? And so I think that's what's really the silver lining of this in many ways, that a lot of these brands are now really adapting and hopefully going to be able to stay ahead of the curve and not be Blockbuster.
Yeah. So, you know, and I was like looking at the product, and I was kind of putting in my own, you know, looking at it through my own lens. I look at, you know, my particular CrossFit facility that I was working with, that when the pandemic hit, they didn't have the technology. They didn't have sort of the wherewithal. They tried doing some virtual classes. The experience was clunky. I was just terrible. It wasn't good. Right. And I look at, you know, obviously that's a single facility, and I know that wouldn't be your target customer, but, you know, if you look at something that is more of a chain or a large, you know, group of different places, and they want to create more of a closed community. They want to be able to stream classes, but they want to stream classes as sort of in addition to their own membership.
Yep.
Versus somebody who, you know, and I think, you know, a big part of your core model is this idea that I can actually become a subscriber to Forte, and now I have access to your community of classes, and there's a rev split in place. Where do you sort of see, and maybe it's parallel, your core market?
Yeah, our core business now is sort of this white label. So we use that technology that we developed for Forte's marketplace, and we basically build that for the UFC. It looks like the UFC. It looks like the YMCA. It looks like their brand, and we power all the tech from end to end behind it, so they can focus on, to your point, building their community, their classes, their programming, the things that they do well and excel at. And we build the tech to power that and make it super easy for them. And I think the cool thing is, like, obviously, you know, in the US alone, our clients have 60 million members, and that's awesome. But most people don't work out, and they live around the corner from these gyms. And like my dream for this company has nothing to do with the pandemic and all of this. It's like, I hope that we can get more people to actually work out and go to the gym that's around the corner from their house. Like, most people say they'll go when they lose weight, and then guess what? They don't lose weight, and then they never go, right? And the barrier to entry is high. You have to feel really pushed to the brink and bad about yourself to walk into a place where people are feeling pretty good about themselves, right? Like, it's a high barrier to entry. So like, I do think and like really hope from the bottom of my heart that this is the opportunity to just increase like the funnel of people just starting to see it makes them feel better and try it at their home, and then hopefully become a real member and want to go in person.
Yeah, I love that mission. You know, I'm very passionate about that as well, just in regards to just how important physical fitness is in life, and you know, just how it translates to every other part of your life. You know, there's a really interesting book. It's called Made to Stick, and they talk about this concept of it's the curse of knowledge, and the basically the point of it is it's really difficult for humans to remember what it's like not to know something, or to go back at a period that's different than where they're at now. And you know, like yourself, obviously, and a lot of people out there, working out is just a part of their life. Totally. They do it all the time. They do it every week. They've probably done it every week for the last however many years. So it's just like, yeah, of course you work out. But there are people out there who don't work out, and the thought of working out is such a it's like a major obstacle to overcome. And I think you talked about it in one of your interviews, just, you know, when you're not in shape and you haven't worked out before, it's really intimidating. And I love that kind of like approach that you're taking of, you know, it's really like a mission driven approach, right? Totally. It's more of like, hey, how do we make this country and this world healthier?
Totally. And I'm very fascinated by the mind and habits and all of those things. But it's like, if somebody told you like, hey, take this pill, you'll sleep better, you will be happier, you will feel better, you will look better, your cholesterol will be better, your heart rate will be stronger, like literally like 100 positive side effects. And like, people are like, I guess I'm not going to do, like, it's like, obviously they know that that's good, right? Like, it's so clear that it's so good for you, but there's just this like level to start doing that. That's so hard. And for me, like, my hack is, I have days that I'm so busy, I'll just run to the West Side Highway in the city and back. And it's like, it takes me 6 minutes. And then I get in the shower and I start getting ready for my day. Like, it's just keeping the habit of doing something. It's if you don't do it, your body doesn't crave it. You don't, it's like, it's just like, it's not something that I program it into my day and I do it no matter what the duration or how good of a workout I feel it is, versus just saying like, oh, I'll skip it, and I crave it, right? My body craves it. Like, I look forward to that moment in the day. And I think to get to that point is just, yeah, like, all the books about habits and things like that, right? You need to really recondition your body and your mind to want to do that, right? And I think that the main thing is just you're getting in your own way at first, right? You're just embarrassed. That's like step one, and then creating that habit, right, to get through it. So like the cool feature that we built, you could show your video only to the trainer, so you can connect with the trainer, but now you're like seeing inside a UFC gym. You're like, this is what happens in there. Like, I think part of it too is just like, it's mysterious. You don't know what the people are like. You don't know, there's all these things that you want to know, but you have to go there. And then, even like going to a new class, I never used to go to a new class by myself. I was like scared I needed to go with a friend. Now I'm like a big girl. I could go to a CrossFit gym in another city by myself, and, I have that confidence because me, and I work out all the time, and I was intimidated to walk into a place I kind of didn't know the drill. So I get it. And I think like, I hope that this is a way for them to reach those people, and they have so many members, and they can get their members to, hopefully kind of bring somebody else into the mix. So I think digital is hopefully the gateway for increasing that, because the funnel should be increasing much faster with all the information we have about our health, right? But it's going up. More people are being active, but very slowly. It's not increasing as fast as, one would hope.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's so many things I want to just dive into. Before we move on, though, I do have a question. I was talking to a co-founder on this other venture yesterday, and we're putting something together, and we're talking about virtual versus hybrid versus sort of everyone back in the office again. Yep. And it was very similar to the conversation we talked about, like that bell's kind of been, you can't unring that bell.
Totally.
Like people, the 5-day work week, 9 to 5, come in an office every day, fight traffic. I don't think we're ever going to get back to it, but there are really like some important things about being able to be in rooms together and whiteboarding sessions and collaborations and culture building. And, and not everyone honestly can work from home. Like some people just don't have the space. Really? Where, as you're building a company and your company's growing super rapidly, you're CEO of this company, like how are you thinking about that? And how are you, you structuring your work environment?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we went from a couple people to, 50, 60 people very quickly. And everybody lives all over the place. And so, I'm like thinking to myself, like, we're hiring all these great people. It's amazing because we're not bound to finding people in New York, and they're amazing engineers, and we're getting amazing people. And we have a head of product from Nike who lives in Portland because they worked at Nike. And, so we're getting all these amazing people. And I'm like, what am I doing? We're just building this massive team, and nobody's in this. Everyone is in different places. Like, how is this going to work? And so to your point, eventually I was like, we need to all come together. But obviously there's a lot going on right now, which makes it complicated. So we decided to hold a retreat and get everyone together. And everyone was putting together their decks to present their verticals. And I was kind of laughing because to me, it wasn't about like whatever the sales team was going to present. I was like, I just want you to like love the person that you work with and be their friend and like have a funny night. We're going to go bowling, and I want you guys to have like inside jokes, and like, you can't get that on Slack, you can't get that same like love for your teammate. And, and so I think like there's totally and I went to a conference a couple months ago, and I came back and I was like, I forgot how awesome that was. Like, it was awesome to be at this conference. And I feel like the pendulum swung so hard the other way that people were like, didn't think they wanted it. But now I think the reality is there needs to we need to figure out a way to be able to have everybody come together. And in our case, it will probably be, we have a home base here in New York. We have a lot of people here, and we'll have the teams come in, and then we'll have like a big retreat and kind of do it like that and break it up. But I do think people need to see each other every once in a while, because we're just working so hard, killing ourselves. And, it starts to, without seeing people, you can't recreate that. But I think it's funny. My cousin left a company he worked for that switched only to virtual only. And he started this new company where they make him go 2 days a week. And he was like happy. He was like, I want to go to the office. I'm like depressed, not seeing my coworkers.
Yeah.
But he's like, if they make me go 3 days, I literally want out like that. And I was like, it's true. Like, he's happy going 2, maybe he'll go 3, but he doesn't want to be forced to go more than that. And so it's funny. I think you need to be supportive of all of that. But I think just not having people connect in real life is just, I think there's nothing to substitute for that. All this stuff is great though. And I think it did move a lot of needles. You can get a lot of business done, without traveling a week to San Francisco to meet an investor and killing
Totally.
a week, right? Like, that's a game changer. And that wouldn't have been something you could do for
Well, most investor meetings now are through Zoom anyways,
Totally.
right? I mean, that is a big shift. It used to be like, oh, hey, I got this meeting. I'm literally going to go jump on a plane and I'm going to fly there and I'm going to go in there and meet. And okay, great. I got this meeting. Now my job is to see if I can plan 3 or 4 meetings so that flight's worthwhile, right?
Exactly. Then you're like scrambling, like, who else can I see when I'm around there? Like, I'm flying across the country. Yeah, that's totally like a game changer, I think, in a lot of ways. But like, even like, we have all these clients that we've worked with now for a while. And I was like, I had never met any of them in person. And it was funny because when we met in person, I obviously felt like I had already known them, right? Like, it was,
yeah.
So it's definitely, I mean, it's still great. Like, I feel like this is definitely makes business faster. You can get a lot more done and execute things, but there's certainly nothing like to replace being together and just, that type of bonding and stuff like that. So I think it's hard for us. Yeah. I mean, we have people everywhere, so we definitely have to be a remote team to some extent.
Yeah, no, it's, I think one of the bright spots of this whole situation is it forced us to accelerate technology. And, really there's collaboration tools and just Zoom, like, yeah, people did it before, but it's just gotten to the point where everybody's so comfortable with it now. And I find, look, we're having a conversation right now, and I feel engaged in the conversation, and I feel like it's productive. We don't necessarily have to be in the same room together. And I think your point's exactly right, though. I mean, there's like a team building aspect and sort of a spontaneity of being in the office together and kind of those organic conversations. But as far as like just the ability to get work accomplished, you can be done in these settings.
Totally. I became an efficiency monster though. Like, I actually was refusing to meet people when they were trying to meet. Cause I was like, I can't meet you for 3 hours, not be on my email. Like, are you crazy? Like, right. I actually had to like force myself to like reemerge a little bit at first.
To get back out and like meet people in person.
Gyms too. I'm like, these are your clients. You got to go to support them.
Yeah.
They're opening the doors, Lauren. Like, get out of your house. Like, I became so efficient that I was like not willing to go back to the other way. And I was like, that's also, I actually had to force myself to resume some things that I was doing before because it's just so efficient this way.
Yeah, totally. You're like, oh, you're uptown? No, it's going to take me like 30 minutes to get up there. I'm not going to spend that time.
Yeah, like, crazy. That could have been a whole other call. And I'm like, what if it goes over?
Yeah.
And how am I going to plan the afternoon? So like, I definitely like scared myself a little bit. I was like, Lauren, you can't operate like this. This is not a healthy world either.
I love it. So where did you grow up? What, you're East Coast?
Yep. I grew up in Long Island. So
okay.
Far from the city. Yep. And my there.
So one of the things you do, I find myself doing too, it's obviously the name of the podcast. You can probably tell where I'm from, but I've noticed like in a lot of the times you've been interviewed and a lot of your introductions, it starts off with college athlete,
yep.
former Division I athlete. So I want to talk a little bit about that. 2-time All-American, Maryland, right? University of Maryland. Is that where you went?
Yep.
A Terp. Do you find that people respond differently if they hear that you're an athlete? Is it because Forte is in athletics and kind of in the sports world, or is it just something that you feel helped shape who you were, or maybe all of those? But I'm just curious why you choose to lead with that in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think for a couple of reasons. I think one, I'm competitive and I will fight to the death of me. And I think that as an entrepreneur, if you don't have that mentality, you're going to be having a rough time, right? So I think that's one thing, right? It's just like you learn to fight, you learn to lose, you learn to pick yourself back up and keep going the next day. And I think that that's something that you learn in sports like you can't learn anywhere else, right? Like how to work with a team, how like you can't do something by yourself, right? Especially in a team sport, which is what I played. I think all those like lessons that are so valuable are something that comes from sports that I'm so grateful for. And also just like they always say like what you're doing when nobody's watching, like, it's, that's such like a cheesy line, but it's like so true, right? It's like, that's the truth of the matter. Like I always like working out with my nephew and I was like, if they say do 10, I do 11. And he's like, why? I'm like, because I want to be better than everybody. Like that's why I do that. Like, I'm like, that's how my head thinks. Like, and he was like, why would you do that? I'm like, because everyone's doing 10. I want to be better. I don't want to be the same as everybody. Like, that's my mentality. And I don't know, it's always sort of just been in me. And I think that, and also obviously the industry is fitness, right? So I think that that's relevant. I'm a big user of this space. Like, I think a lot of people start companies that they see opportunities in. And I think that one of the things that comes across that people always say is that I'm so passionate about this. Like, I don't feel like a car salesman. Like I used to go to the UFC gyms to go box because I loved it. And now I work with them. And that's such an honor to work with them now. It's like, I mean it from the bottom of my heart that I'm like, I love these places and I believe in the mission of them. So I think that's the other side of it too, is that I really appreciate, I think that's what's interesting about fitness. Like, I think that people appreciate that I also appreciate what they do and their craft so much. Cause if you go into that industry, you're very passionate about it. And it's like, and I think that comes across because like, it means so much to me too. And I think that matters to people that go into this industry specifically. That makes sense.
Yeah. So you talk about being competitive and I had like the proudest dad moment the other day. So I have two daughters, myself, awesome. My 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and my, both, athletes and doing their thing and their level. And I'm at volleyball. She's in a volleyball club team, and I'm just kind of watching from the side, and I don't know, whatever happens. The coach is like, all right, everybody, do your thing. And they got to do burpees.
Yep.
And I'd never seen this before. So there's like 15 girls or 12 girls, and they jump down and they start doing burpees. And I'm watching my daughter, and she's like crushing these burpees, dude, like up, down. I'm like, damn, I'm impressed. Yep. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4. She gets up to 15, and she gets up, she stands there, and she kind of just stands there and watches. And she watches all the girls. And, so 10, 15 seconds later, the girls kind of like slowly finish. And afterwards, I'm like, babe, what were you trying to like beat everybody? Like, was that what she was like? Oh yeah. Like, I want the fastest one, show them that I could do it better than they could. And I'm like, yes, like, that's it. That's what you need. Like, that's what's going to make you successful in life.
Totally.
No. So I agree. I mean, first of all, I think one of the things that's really cool, for you is, so much of like coaching and, opening up a gym or whatever it might be, it is a passion. And I think there's people that are truly, truly passionate about it, but it's almost like, it's like being a school teacher. You're going to kind of like make this like commitment of like, well, I'm probably not going to make a lot of money, but this is what I'm going to do. And, you're one of those lucky people that you put yourself in a situation where it's like, you get to live this life that you love and you're passionate about and so close to who you are. And you feel purpose, but at the same time, like, you're building a badass company. Like you're doing some pretty special things out there. So how's the fundraising coming along?
It's good. It's good. So I think that's a whole thing within itself. Like it took a minute to figure that out, and just sort of like, I used to work in finance. So I kind of get that side of the things, but it's still a whole different world. So I think for me, it's interesting because, you're asking for money, you have this conviction, you kind of have to learn it like anything else. I think now I feel like I understand the process. I understand what they need. They have goals and you have goals, and sometimes they're very different, but they have to return money to their, to their funds. And so they have different objectives. And now I understand everybody's objective. Right. And so how how do you get there? And I think that that's that took some time to understand, who was the right person at the right time, and that all the semantics that go around with that, right? There's wealthy angels that just are passionate too about it and want to help you, right? There's that. Then there's funds, and they have different trajectories. So just starting to really understand that world, and I feel like I've got a good grasp on it now. But it took a lot of time, going in a lot of meetings where I walked out and I was like, I got a lot of things to figure out, and so it feels good to kind of have that figured out now. And we've raised over 10 million. We're raising another round now that we're working to close. We have incredible investors. Obviously, all the folks from Unicorn Hunters are amazing, but also great institutional investors that are super supportive. And, I got really lucky too. There were some meetings where I thought they were going to lead the round and it didn't end up working out. And now I have an amazing 76 Capital led our last 2 rounds, and the guys there are awesome. And we've had to have tough calls where I'm like, listen, this isn't working. That's not working. And they were, so supportive. And there were times where I almost did deals with investors that were a nightmare from the start, and they weren't even my investor. Yeah. So I think, obviously you don't always have a choice, right? It feels good now to be at a stage where I'm actually looking at everything they stand for and working with them. So that's cool. But I got lucky because I think I dodged some bullets, because that could make also this journey very difficult.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I'd like to kind of hear your thought process on that, because, you'll talk to some people out there that are like, no, you got to be picky with your investors, because you pick a nightmare investor. You're married to that person. It's very difficult to divorce them. And, you want to pick the right partners, but then, you say that to some other
it's hard
founders
to get
who are just like
$10 million check. So you don't.
Yeah. This person wants to write me a check. You're telling me to say no.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's it's easy to say that. It's easy to say that, but when you start trying to raise and, figuring out how hard it is to get, less than the number of percentage of people that get to these funding rounds that we're in is under 1%. It's
yeah.
And for a female, it's like zillionth of that percent. So it's
sure.
Now the odds are literally you have to be really confident to be able to pull that off. So I think it's easier said than done to not pick to say, just try to pick good people, because it's really hard to get money in the beginning, right? And to get it going.
That's
and
right.
So I think I feel like I got lucky in that regard, that I actually have incredible people that I'm always blown away by how they respond to things and how supportive they are and stuff like that, which is awesome. And you also just don't know too, right? People, you don't start dating somebody and they're like, by the way, every time we fight, I'm going to be horrible. They don't tell you their worst traits. So
that's true.
You may not always know. And they're, so it's it's good to look into it, but at the same time, you may not have a lot of options. Right. And so I think that's something I feel like I got lucky. There's a lot of stories where people ended up having really great successes and bad outcomes because they got screwed over, things like that. And it's not always something you could see coming.
So I'm curious about this, because it's actually, having lived it, I know how incredibly difficult founding a tech startup is, especially if you're not necessarily a tech person, right? Your background was in Wall Street.
Yep.
I mean, you're a bond trader on Wall Street. So a couple things, questions I have, and kind of put it all together. One, when you got a job on Wall Street, I'm assuming you're making some pretty decent money, leaving that to start something that's completely unknown and so much risk involved, I think is really difficult. But secondly, and from what I've been able to see, the product looks amazing. And it's not trivial from a technical perspective, knowing what you're actually doing. How did you go about handling the tech side and taking your idea and turning it into reality?
Yeah, I think my naiveness on both of those fronts was crucial to doing all of this. I had no idea what building a company meant. And so it was I had so much conviction on this, and I was I don't want to tell a sad story that I thought of that first and I didn't invent it. I was everyone's I thought of that. I knew that was going to happen. I'm I don't want to tell that story. I'm I need to leave and figure this out. Had I known all the things now, yeah, I left an incredible career. It was crushing it, and so I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I think that was helpful. And I think in terms of the tech, one of the reasons that our tech is so extraordinary and light years ahead of everybody else is because I don't understand tech. The engineers were what you're asking is not possible. I'm no, this is possible. I don't know how it is, but I know we can do this. Like, it needs to work like this. You can't expect a gym operator to have a production studio to be able to figure that, like, they don't know these things. Like, pretend they're me. I don't know how to do it. So if I can't do it, this isn't what you're saying isn't going to resonate with them. Like, and I would just push back on all the things at so many junctures. And we got to this place where we have this miraculous automated global system, live producing classes that nobody lifts a finger for every day. And that was because I didn't understand what the limits were. And I just kept like looking for them to go a different way. So I think in many ways it worked in my favor because I didn't understand all the things I was getting into.
Totally. You came at it from like the product development side from a user perspective, of understanding of like, hey, listen, I need it to do these things. And then you work along the way versus, sometimes you're right. Like, too much about the technology and you kind of get in your mind of what you need to do. And then you're developing something that's like, great, it's awesome, but it doesn't actually resonate and doesn't work.
They'd be like, you know how a camera lens works? I'm like, yeah, no, I don't. Like, you're trying to insult me right now. I realize what's happening, but no, I don't know the lens. I don't know what that means. Like, and then I'm like, you're trying to insult me. I'm not insulted. I'm like, I know that it should look like this. Like, I don't want it to look like a GoPro. I want it to look like a movie. Like, I want, we would always have these conversations where I'm like, this is what we need to figure out. And so, yeah, definitely, I think if you know tech, you would just say like, well, that's not possible, or the technology is not advanced to support this or that. And so, yeah, I think that was actually really helpful and obviously having good people around me, right, and building a great team. I think that was obviously the most important thing. I know what I know and I know what I don't. So
yeah. Did you end up working with an agency or did you just have, like individuals?
Yeah. I went on like my LinkedIn and I typed in tech and I was like, I only know traders. I know.
Love that.
I knew like two people that had tech in their like LinkedIn and I called them both. And one of them had been early at Kickstarter and was instrumental in helping me figuring it out. Another one had built a network for entrepreneurs. And so I got immersed in that and was able to start finding the right people and bringing on tech partners ultimately because we build, hardware and software in a highly technical product. So it was core to have, these people around that were good at that. And even now, like my right-hand man, our CFO, he kind of holds both roles. He had built and scaled a company before. And so, like there are a lot of mistakes to be made and to have somebody that has done that, like it's very valuable. Right. So I think that's the other thing is like, don't spin your wheels trying to do everything and find people that know things that you don't know. Right. Like, and I think that that's important to do in the early days. And sometimes it's hard because you don't have money and like navigating all of that is a journey, but getting good people around you quickly and stuff like that, I think is super important to succeeding, like on the field, right? So it always goes back to sports in my head. I'm like, it's like same thing if you were playing a game, like you'd pick the best players, right? You'd want to practice and work hard with them, right? It's the same like concept, I think, at the end of the day in my head.
Are you a big sports analogy person? Do you do that with your team a lot?
No, but I realize that all the sentiments that I'm saying, I'm like it all, even like just working out. It's like if you do it every day, you will be able to do push-ups. Like I don't care if you think you are genetically fit or not. Like your body will do it. I'm like, if we do this every day, we execute with this level of performance, like it will work. Like that's how this works. Yeah. Like it's not like she's lucky, they're stronger, they're fitter, their dad was an athlete. Like, you just put in the work and it will pay off.
Yeah, no, the only reason I ask is, in a fun way, my team used to always like make fun of me because I could turn everything into a sports analogy of some sorts. Yeah. And, it just happened that a lot of people on my team weren't necessarily athletes. So they'd just be like, eyes would roll back in their head. Like, here Greg goes with another, it's just like football or it's just like a team or it's just like a whatever. But, no, I love it. I mean, look, I've said it before in the show, but like the whole genesis of this, podcast in general was I just started to like look at all these different similarities between not just, founding the team and or founding a company and the entrepreneurship, but just building a team and building culture and what it takes, when you hire, what kind of things you're looking for in people. And there were just all these like kind of like direct parallels back to athletics and, I applied to my professional life. So I thought there was an interesting connection there and I just wanted to share it, but it seems like you're very familiar with that connection. Do you find yourself gravitating to hire ex-athletes?
Well, I would say specifically in the engineering world, it's not
really.
That's not the case. In my, like, even looking for our CTO, I'm like, I want him to be an athlete and super passionate about fitness. And like, so it just, it doesn't usually work itself out in that side of the business, but on the more business team, that is definitely, people are more into fitness. But on the engineering side, I'm struggling. It's funny, we did a workout with the team, and it was led by our director of content, who's an athlete and a trainer, and the engineers were dying. And like, some of them are young, some of them, and like, they were dying. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is, people, to your point, people's never worked out a day in their life. I was like, oh my God, they're going to get sick. Like, we need to cool it.
Yeah.
God, I was like, we're going to walk away with half the team here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, one of the things, I've been following you for a while now on LinkedIn. You're crushing the PR side of things. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Unicorn Hunters, the MVP show that was interesting. By the way, did TO stay on? Did that actually materialize?
We never actually leveraged it, but we still talk to their team and stuff like that. So we could certainly end with Grant Cos, and I still talk to the producers of the show. So I was kind of like, I felt like now we're in a place with a little more muscle behind us that we can execute well.
Come back.
Yeah. So that one, we didn't pursue anything yet, but I think some of them.
So how are you managing that? Is that something that you do? It's just who you are, your own connections? Did you bring in an outside firm? Like, I mean, because it's amazingly powerful and it gets you out there, and it's something that you're talking to an investor, is taking something to committee or whatever it is, and people are researching you and they're coming across this, and there's all this amazing stuff out there.
Totally, yeah. We don't actually have a firm or anything. I guess, again, I'm just like, this is like my whole ethos, and my every ounce of everything I say and do is, I think, my whole existence. And I don't know, I've gotten some of the opportunities from a community that I'm a part of, which has been instrumental in presenting those opportunities. So like, where writers are looking to, highlight people and stuff like that. So it's called Dreamers and Doers, like a women's like entrepreneur network that's been instrumental in getting some of that visibility. And also then just sort of one thing kind of leads to another. Like, I spoke at one conference that I don't even know how I got on the mix of it. And then I started to get asked to speak at more conferences, and I never made a public speech since like the second grade, when I talked about like a science project, and my old job, like I just sat at a computer and worked. And so it was a pretty like rude awakening to have to start presenting. Like, I'm super chatty and like super social, but to put me on a stage and like have me do a 20-minute presentation was like, whoa, I don't really know how to do that. So it took a minute to kind of figure that all out too, right? And to kind of hone that craft. And I think, so that's been interesting within itself, right? Like, even though I'm very social, this was a whole world for me to figure out, Yeah. I mean, you obviously come off very polished. So I was going to ask this question earlier. We didn't get to it. A little bit of the sausage bait. When you're on these like Shark Tank type of, Unicorn Hunter type shows, is it literally like, hey, you're going to have 3 minutes, like put your thing together and you go in cold, or is it a lot of coaching? And I mean, there's no, it is like, I don't get to talk. No, it is exactly what you see. And then it's so interesting, because it's like, I'm like, basically feel like I black out when I go out there. Like, I get off there and I'm like, did I just make any sense? Like, people are like, that was great. I'm like, okay, good. Cause just like go into autopilot. I think you're so nervous. Like, no, the cool thing though, is like everyone was so nice, and like, all the people out there were so nice. And so, but no, there's no, like, they're not prepping you for anything. It's just really kind of thrown into the mix. They didn't know who I was when I got out there or anything like that. So it was it's certainly nerve wracking. It's interesting. Like, even just all these, like I said, public speaking in general is like, you have to do it and I think that's like, I've figured out that like, that's important to getting out there and building a brand and building an identity. And so if you don't like doing it, you have to do it. Like, I think that's why a lot of like, I used to worry, like I would tell somebody my idea and they would steal it. And I was like, a lot of the engineers that work for us, they're not going to steal the company. Like, they're not going to go out there and do this, right? Like, it's a certain type of craft to get out there and do this. And I think it's important to, building the whole identity of the company.
Yeah. I have a joke with a small group of friends. We'll get asked to look at, hey, I got a startup. Would you listen to my pitch, or, could you help me, or your coach or whatever? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Happy to help you. I'd love to hear your idea. I'll give you any, recommendations, kind of introductions I can. And they're like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and send over an NDA, right? Or something. Yeah, you're like,
people always offer to sign it. I'm like, doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're like, all right, look, first of all, an idea is worth the paper it's written on. Like there's so much involved in execution that, you think your idea is so great that I'm just going to take it and run with it on my own.
Totally. I'm like, seal it. Call me when you're pulling your hair out. I would love to try to execute this.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not that easy.
So what are the some of the big lessons? I mean, for entrepreneurs out there or people who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, I mean, this isn't an overnight success. You've been at this for a number of years, and I'm sure, there's been some peaks and valleys along the way, as we talked about earlier. Like, what is some of the advice you'd give to somebody who's looking to start something?
Yeah, I think to just get started, I think is the main thing, like not neurosing over the right time or getting it right or, all of those semantics, to just start doing stuff and figuring it out and iterating. And you may not end up where you start. And I think a lot of people think about things all the time, and you can always find a million reasons not to do something. And I think that even if this didn't end up working out or something, I think I'm so grateful that I did this, because I used to work on Wall Street, which is very lucrative, but what was I doing every day? Like I couldn't even imagine going back to my old life. Like I'm like, now I'm building something that's like helping gyms connect to community, getting people fit. Like the whole impetus for what we do is so meaningful, and I'm so passionate about. And, treasury auctions and the Federal Reserve and, like, what was I really doing every day? And I think so even though you may not end up where you start and it may not work out, because that's the odds, I feel like I'm so fortunate that I discovered this whole path that makes me so happy. And that opened this whole other world to me. And I think that, so it'll always be okay, but you may not end up where you start. But I think just get started. If you're wondering, you shouldn't just sit there and wonder, because I think that's what everything does. Like, just, well, what if? Well, just try it. Worst case, you go back to what you were doing. Like, it's all going to be good.
Yeah. It's a little like, working out or anything, right? Like if you look at it in total, it can be daunting. Like, how do I do that? There's a million things to do. Oh my God. And then you get like the paralysis by analysis and do anything, or, oh my God, I'll never be like that person. It's like, yeah, well, start off by doing 5 minutes of cardio.
Exactly.
Like take a walk. And then tomorrow add in a minute, and it's like you just kind of slowly take these little steps, and then the one thing leads to another. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
You talk about women entrepreneurship and some of the challenges there. What have you seen firsthand, and what would be some specific recommendations to women out there? Yeah,
I think just I think for me, I didn't think there were challenges until I see some of the statistics and realize there's just a lot less. It's just, that's the odds. There's a lot less money funneling into female-founded companies and things like that. So it's just a reality. But I think as an athlete, I always see everything. I'm like, well, whatever. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to make it as a competition in my head. But I think the main thing is really just having a lot of conviction in what you're doing, and don't let anybody, I'm like, this investor's looking at 100 deals. They don't know anything. I focus on this every day, all day. Right. I think that's the main thing for anybody, whether you're a male or a female. It's like, you go in there, more than they do about it. So don't let anybody,
that's right.
You need to, walk in there, say your thing. And if they don't see what you see, then you kind of need to move on. I think that's the main thing. And it's easy to, a lot of times, a lot of investors will say, well, my wife works out like this. And I'm like, you're investing your money in this, not, your wife's not the investor here at the table. It always makes me laugh because, they don't go to classes or do these things. So it's kind of funny. But I think for me, it's just, going in there and just having that conviction that you do know more. You think about this all day, every day, right? I think that's the main advice that I have, is just going in there and just taking every piece of advice with a grain of salt, and kind of keeping to your guns, right? And not letting people sway you when smart people are saying, you should look at, doing crypto things, like all these crazy ideas, or like whatever their background they project on you, right? So I think that's something you need to stay focused on, your ultimate goal, right?
That's such a like a funny investor thing where, you know, they're starting to go like, oh God, there seems to be a lot of money flowing in the crypto space. And then you come in and they're like, have you thought about crypto? It's like,
we're gonna do
let's just apply it to everything.
yeah, exactly. Like all these random things. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. This is about people like, you know, working out.
Yeah.
But
Well, listen, I love what you're doing. I think the product makes so much sense to me. Just as someone who sort of lived it, I guess, anecdotally in my own experiences, but like also someone who comes from a software background and understanding how, you know, really software that's successful is taking something complex and solving a hard problem and doing it simply.
Yeah.
And you just know there's so many of these facilities out there that want this utility. It makes sense for all parties involved.
Yep.
It's a better consumer experience. It's additional ways to monetize and, you know, expand as a facility, whatever the sport is. But it's a super complex, difficult problem, and you know, your ability to come in there and solve it quickly just makes tons and tons of sense.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I wake up every morning and I feel like I get on a treadmill at 12 and it's so exciting. And every day is just like, yeah, I'm just so excited to just keep building this and seeing where everything keeps evolving. I'm grateful to have a job like this that I get to, you know, be so passionate about. It's super exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and speaking with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to chat.